The moment the empath snaps, a danger the narcissist never saw coming. Carl Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." And nowhere is that more true than in the life of an empath who has finally had enough. When the empath snaps, it's not out of weakness, it's out of years of carrying silent battles that no one else could see. This moment of awakening is both powerful and dangerous, not only for the empath, but especially for the narcissist who never saw it coming. As you listen, I want you to reflect on your own journey. Have you ever reached a breaking point where your silence turned into strength? Share your experience in the comments, because your story could be the light that guides someone else. Welcome to Spiritual Wisdom, where we dive into Carl Jung's deepest insights and uncover the hidden truths of the soul. 1. The breaking point of the empath is their awakening. Carl Jung once wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." And in the journey of the empath, this truth becomes undeniable. For years, the empath carries the burdens of others, gentle, giving, and self-sacrificing, absorbing every wound and every shadow as if it were their own. Yet Jung observed that when the empath reaches the point of saying enough, something extraordinary happens. They do not harden into cruelty, but instead become unbreakable. This is the alchemical moment when years of suffering are transmuted into psychological gold, when weakness transforms into radiant power, and when the empath ceases to be a passive vessel of pain and becomes an active force of light that no manipulation can extinguish. What makes this moment so powerful is its quiet inevitability. The empath, once pliable and endlessly forgiving, suddenly shifts, not with anger, but with clarity. The same energy that once fueled endurance now fuels liberation. Like coal under immense pressure, transforming into diamond, the empath's long-endured trials forge a new self that shines with resilience. Jung's intelligence and spiritual wisdom revealed that narcissists unconsciously fear this transformation because their control dissolves the instant the empath awakens. Boundaries replace submission, silence replaces pleading, and presence becomes a weapon sharper than any words. The narcissist, once confident in their domination, stands powerless in the face of an awakened soul they can no longer bend. This awakening is not merely survival, it is a rebirth. Jung warned, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." For the empath, snapping is not the collapse of self, but the revelation of it. The unconscious patterns of overgiving and self-erasure dissolve, leaving behind an authentic identity anchored in truth. The empath no longer seeks approval or validation from those who exploit their kindness. They discover that their worth has never been tied to how much pain they can carry for others, but to how courageously they can honor their own light. In this moment, they shift from victim to creator, from absorber of darkness to transmitter of clarity. Reaching this threshold is not weakness, but destiny. Every tear, every betrayal, every moment of exhaustion becomes part of the alchemy that births an unshakable self. When the empath finally whispers, "I deserve peace," they claim a power that narcissists cannot touch. This is the true essence of spiritual awakening. The pain that once crushed you becomes the wisdom that sets you free. And once this transformation occurs, no shadow can dim your light. No manipulation can sway your truth, and no abuser can ever define your story again. Comment below. I awaken in my power. If you are ready to embrace the breaking point as the true beginning of your spiritual awakening. 2. Shadow integration turns the wounded healer into a sovereign healer. For much of their journey, empaths carry the emotional weight of others, silently absorbing pain and trauma that was never theirs to begin with. They become healers through sacrifice, pouring themselves out for those around them. But this giving often leaves them drained, depleted, and vulnerable to exploitation. Carl Jung revealed that the turning point comes when the empath confronts and integrates their shadow, the repressed anger they fear, the boundaries they never honored, the instinct for self-protection they denied. In that moment of shadow integration, they stop healing from a place of martyrdom and begin healing from a place of strength, shifting from the wounded healer to the sovereign healer who gives without losing themselves. The shadow, once seen as dangerous, becomes the greatest teacher. Anger, when repressed, poisons the empath, but when integrated, it sharpens into clarity. Boundaries, long misunderstood as selfish walls, reveal themselves as sacred gates that protect energy and preserve dignity. Self-protection, once rejected as unspiritual, transforms into the backbone of discernment. This process mirrors alchemy itself. The empath has carried lead in the form of others' poison, yet through self-integration, that lead is transmuted into gold, into pure and unbreakable strength. Jung described this as individuation, the profound process of turning unconscious wounds into conscious wisdom. In modern life, this may look like saying no without guilt, walking away from toxic relationships without regret, or choosing rest without apology. Each act becomes a declaration of sovereignty, a refusal to be consumed by the darkness of others. The sovereign healer emerges when compassion and power fuse into one. No longer a passive vessel for suffering, the empath becomes an active force of light, unshaken by manipulation and untouchable by exploitation. Healing is no longer about absorbing another's pain, but about reflecting truth back to them. Spirituality deepens here, no longer defined by endless sacrifice, but by balance, mastery, and discernment. This is the stage of spiritual awakening, where empathy is guided by wisdom, and boundaries are recognized as sacred expressions of love. To those who once thrived on their weakness, this transformation is terrifying, because the empath who snaps does not retaliate with cruelty, but with silence, distance, and unshakable strength. In a world marked by burnout, manipulation, and emotional exploitation, this transformation is both necessary and revolutionary. Many empaths have been conditioned to believe that spirituality means forgiving without end and giving without limit. But true spiritual wisdom reveals that discernment itself is an act of love. Your anger is not your enemy. It is the signal that you deserve respect. Your boundaries are not cruelty. They are evidence that you value yourself. Your exhaustion is not weakness. It is the sign that your soul is calling you into sovereignty. Jung reminded us that there is no coming to consciousness without pain, and it is through that pain that the empath awakens into their truest form. The wounded healer, once defined by sacrifice, rises as the sovereign healer, empowered by wisdom, anchored in strength, and radiant in spiritual sovereignty. 3. Empathic sensitivity becomes a superpower, not a weakness. Carl Jung taught that the unconscious, once brought into awareness, transforms destiny, and this truth shines clearly in the path of the empath. Sensitivity, long dismissed as weakness, is in fact a neurological and spiritual gift. With heightened mirror neurons and deep emotional processing, empaths are naturally designed to feel and to know what others cannot see. When this gift operates unconsciously, it can feel like a burden, leaving them vulnerable to exhaustion, deceit, and manipulation. Yet once they awaken and begin to use it consciously, sensitivity evolves into a superpower. It becomes psychological X-ray vision, a precise radar for detecting lies, hidden motives, and unconscious drives in others, allowing them to see through masks with piercing clarity. For years, empaths may have been silent carriers of other people's pain, absorbing shadows that were never theirs to hold. But when awareness dawns, the energy shifts. They stop being the vessel of toxicity and instead become the revealer of truth. Jung described this as an alchemical process where poison transforms into gold, and this is exactly what happens inside the empath's soul. Their very presence begins to shine with light that no deception can dim, and those who once relied on control and manipulation find themselves disarmed. This is not cruelty, nor a loss of compassion. It is the birth of resilience, the rising of a force that cannot be broken. The empath snaps not by becoming harsh, but by becoming unshakably strong. On a deeper level, this turning point is a form of spiritual awakening. Spirituality teaches that what once wounded us often becomes the source of our highest strength. And for the empath, this transformation is the essence of spiritual development. Sensitivity no longer drags them into chaos. It sharpens their discernment and aligns them with truth. They learn to love without losing themselves, to give without being drained, to see without being deceived. Their role in the world changes, from passive absorbers to conscious healers, guides, and truth tellers whose very energy compels others to face their shadows. What once felt like an unbearable burden is revealed as a sacred mission. The lesson is that sensitivity must never be despised. It is not weakness, but a compass, a divine radar, a channel of wisdom. To embrace it is to step into clarity and power. To direct it consciously is to live in freedom. In a world clouded by manipulation and illusions, the empath's awakened vision is priceless. The journey that begins with pain culminates in empowerment, and the very gift that once caused suffering becomes the greatest blessing. Sensitivity, when aligned with spirituality and guided by spiritual development, is not only the empath's survival, it is their superpower, their gold, their unshakable strength. Stay connected with our community of spiritual wisdom by subscribing to our channel. Here, we explore how empathic sensitivity transforms from a perceived weakness into a true superpower. Together, we awaken to Carl Jung's deepest insights and discover the strength hidden within the soul. Remember, you are not fragile. You are powerful, radiant, and worthy of the light you carry. 4. The three-stage transformation of the awakened empath. Recognition is the first turning point where the empath finally wakes up and sees the cycle clearly. The endless blame placed on them, the habit of overgiving, and the quiet self-sacrifice that drains the soul. It is the moment they realize that empathy without boundaries becomes a trap, a net that narcissists skillfully weave to exploit kindness. In this awakening, the empath admits to themselves that much of the pain they carry is not even their own. This recognition is not just a mental realization, but the birth of true emotional intelligence, a light cutting through years of darkness, and it marks the beginning of freedom from invisible chains. From there, the journey flows into integration, the stage where empathy is no longer a sponge for others' suffering, but a finely sharpened tool for discernment. The empath discovers that their sensitivity is not a curse, but a compass. They stop absorbing every wound around them and instead begin to read energies, detecting deception and hidden motives with clarity. As Carl Jung once said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And this is exactly what integration provides the privilege of finally standing in truth. Here, the empath stops living as a victim of manipulation and starts directing their empathy inward, transforming it into wisdom, resilience, and strength. What once overwhelmed them now empowers them, because they have learned that compassion does not mean self-destruction. The final stage is sovereignty, the crown of the empath's transformation, where the need for approval dissolves like mist in the morning sun. No longer do they chase validation or bend under the weight of others' expectations. Through individuation, the sacred process Jung described as becoming whole embodies authenticity so fully that deception cannot sway them, manipulation cannot break them, and judgment cannot define them. Sovereignty is the moment they step into their full essence, no longer fractured by external demands, but radiating a presence that is both grounded and untouchable. This is where the empath becomes the force the narcissist never anticipated, unyielding, self-possessed, and guided by inner truth. Recognition, integration, and sovereignty together create the map of transformation that every awakened empath must travel. To see the toxic pattern is to reclaim clarity. To integrate is to wield empathy as intelligence and spiritual wisdom. And to stand in sovereignty is to live as an unshakable being who finally understands, in Jung's words, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." 5. Real-life scenarios prove the shift is powerful. For years, people like Sarah, Michael, and Lisa the predator at work, the manipulator in the family, and the draining romantic partner seemed to hold all the power, feeding on kindness and mistaking empathy for weakness. Yet the moment of spiritual awakening changes everything. Because the empath does not retaliate with cruelty, but withdraws the one thing the narcissist depends on: participation. And in that quiet act, the entire structure of control begins to collapse, exposing toxic games for what they are, and opening the door to true liberation. Sarah's story shows this clearly. Targeted for years by a workplace predator who thrived on intimidation and subtle power plays, she endured in silence until the day she stopped reacting, stopped carrying the weight of his games, and chose peace over performance. And suddenly, the bully had nothing left to manipulate, for her silence revealed the emptiness of his threats, turning what seemed like weakness into an unshakable form of strength. A living example of spirituality where light does not fight darkness but starves it. Michael's story carries the same lesson within family ties, where manipulation often hides under the mask of guilt and obligation. For years, he held power by playing the victim card, but the moment his empathic relative awakened and no longer explained, no longer defended, no longer allowed guilt to dictate love, the entire cycle was disrupted, and it became clear that compassion without boundaries is captivity, while true spiritual wisdom teaches that love begins with self-respect. And in a modern world full of family entanglements, this lesson is more vital than ever. Lisa's story reveals the intimate battlefield of romance, where the empath had long mistaken sacrifice for love, drowning in emotional storms and endless drama until awakening redefined what love really means. Not rescuing or absorbing another's chaos, but allowing both souls to meet in truth. And when her partner stepped back, refusing to be drained, Lisa was forced to face her own emptiness, proving that withdrawal was not cruelty, but liberation. For as Carl Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And by refusing to live as a savior, the empath reclaimed authenticity and peace. Each story reveals the same principle. Awakening is not about becoming harder, but about becoming untouchable. And spirituality is not passive, it is power in its purest form. For when you stop playing the role others demand, their script falls apart, their masks slip, and the illusion of control dissolves. And this is why the empath who awakens terrifies the narcissist, not through aggression, but through absence. Because in modern life, whether at work, in family, or in love, predators and manipulators survive only so long as we agree to their game, and the instant we withdraw, they crumble. So the question for you is this: where are you still over-giving, over-explaining, or over-sacrificing? And what patterns in your own life would collapse the moment you stopped participating? Because spiritual awakening is the realization that silence, boundaries, and refusal to carry poison are themselves acts of transformation. And when you embody this truth, as Jung warned, the danger the narcissist never saw coming finally arrives. The mask is broken, the cycle ends, and you emerge not broken, but free. 6. Withdrawal, not war, dismantles manipulation systems. The most powerful act in the face of narcissistic manipulation is not confrontation, but withdrawal, because fighting only feeds the cycle, while detachment dismantles it from the root. Carl Jung described this as psychological immunity, a state of spiritual development where the empath no longer reacts, no longer enables, and no longer carries the poison of another's games. In that moment of refusal, when the empath withholds their energy and emotional response, the narcissist is left facing their own emptiness, stripped of the control they once believed they had. Detachment becomes a silent revolution, a form of psychological nonviolence that collapses manipulation without a single battle cry. This is not avoidance, but transformation, where awareness becomes armor and peace becomes the strongest defense. For too long, empaths often carry the weight of other people's darkness, absorbing it until they nearly break. Yet when they awaken, they realize that their sensitivity was never meant to enslave them, but to guide them toward higher clarity and resilience. By stepping back, they are not abandoning compassion, they are reclaiming dignity. The choice to no longer engage is a profound declaration of sovereignty. Your chaos does not dictate my peace. Your control does not define my worth. In this way, spirituality teaches that liberation is not found in defeating the oppressor, but in refusing to be bound by the chains at all. In everyday life, this wisdom is essential, whether in families, friendships, workplaces, or digital spaces where manipulation thrives. People who seek power over others rely on reactions to keep their influence alive. But once you stop responding, the cycle starves and collapses. Spiritual awakening shows us that true authority comes not from controlling others, but from mastering ourselves. Walking away is not weakness, It is wisdom. It is the conscious decision to preserve your energy for growth, creativity, love, and spiritual development, rather than waste it in endless battles that lead nowhere. The message is timeless. Peace is not a gift handed to you by others. It is a discipline you cultivate within. Detachment is not coldness. It is alignment with your highest truth. It is proof that spirituality is both compassion and boundary, both kindness and strength. And when you choose silence over struggle, clarity over chaos, you rise into a life where your light cannot be dimmed and your spirit cannot be broken. 7. The empathic evolution, from victim to sovereign creator. Carl Jung, with his intelligence and deep spiritual wisdom, revealed that the path of the empath is not one of weakness, but of transformation, an evolution that takes them from unconscious suffering to sovereign creation. In the first stage, the unconscious empath, you may find yourself absorbing the emotions of everyone around you without realizing it, drowning in feelings that are not your own. Without boundaries, you become a container for other people's pain, constantly drained and overwhelmed. This stage feels like a curse, yet it is only the raw form of a gift that has not yet been refined. As Jung reminded us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. At this point, your sensitivity runs your life. But it is not your fate, it is your calling to awaken. The next stage, the awakening empath, begins when you notice the patterns, when you realize that not every storm inside you belongs to you. In this awakening, you start to separate what is yours from what is not. And for the first time, you learn that compassion without boundaries is self-destruction. You begin to guard your energy, to say no without guilt, and to step back without apology. It is a turbulent stage because it challenges everything you were conditioned to believe, but it is also liberating. This is where Jung's words ring true. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. You no longer see yourself as a victim, but as someone in the process of reclaiming their authentic self. In this stage, you stop being a sponge for the world's chaos and become a mirror that reflects back truth and light. Finally comes the sovereign empath, the highest stage of this evolution, where your shadow is no longer denied but integrated, where the pain that once consumed you has been alchemized into wisdom and power. Here, you no longer absorb unconsciously, you direct your empathy with clarity and intention. Your presence itself becomes a force of healing, not because you seek to fix others, but because you embody authenticity. You have discovered that real compassion begins with yourself, and from that center of strength, it flows naturally to others. This is the empath who understands that they are not here to carry the world's wounds, but to stand as a beacon that awakens others to their own power. As Jung taught, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The sovereign empath has walked into the darkness, embraced it, and emerged unshakable. This journey from unconscious to sovereign is not just survival, it is transformation, a passage from victimhood to conscious creation. At this level, no narcissist can control you. No manipulator can bind you, because you see through the illusion. You no longer fear losing people because you have found yourself, and in that discovery, you become part of collective healing, not by sacrificing yourself, but by embodying truth. Your sensitivity becomes your compass. Your empathy becomes your power, and your presence becomes a force of light that reshapes the world. 8. Consciousness is the greatest threat to narcissists and dysfunctional systems. When the empath awakens, they no longer exist to regulate everyone else's chaos. They stop absorbing blame, guilt, and emotional projections that were never theirs to begin with. This quiet refusal sends shockwaves through relationships, families, organizations, and entire social structures that relied on their compliance. Because the empath is no longer willing to be a container for dysfunction, they become a catalyst for transformation, and that makes them a threat. A spiritual threat, a psychological disruption, a walking embodiment of consciousness that destabilizes systems rooted in emotional manipulation. When an empath stops managing everyone else's discomfort and starts tending to their own boundaries, they create an energetic shift that narcissists and toxic systems can't tolerate. Carl Jung spoke of individuation as the sacred path toward wholeness, and that's exactly what the awakened empath chooses. They no longer sacrifice themselves to keep the peace. Instead, they cultivate inner clarity, emotional responsibility, and a fierce loyalty to their own spirit. This is not rebellion. It is return. It is a spiritual awakening. Because as soon as the empath stops performing the old survival role of caretaker, peacekeeper, emotional sponge, the system around them is forced to confront its own instability. What was once hidden becomes undeniable, and what was once tolerated becomes unacceptable. This transformation doesn't begin with anger. It begins with awareness. It begins the moment the empath realizes that love without self-respect is not love, it's servitude. That being the strong one who silently suffers is not noble, it's trauma reenactment. And that being good at emotional CPR for everyone else is not a gift, it's a distortion. So the empath learns to say no, not from cruelty, but from consciousness. Not to punish others, but to protect their energy. Because they understand that boundaries are not walls, they're bridges to healthier connection. They learn to speak directly, to say, "This is not mine," and to sit with the discomfort that honesty brings. And in that space of emotional truth, a deeper power awakens. One that no longer bends to be liked. One that no longer dances around dysfunction. One that no longer apologizes for existing. In today's world, where narcissistic patterns are glamorized and dysfunction is normalized, the conscious empath is revolutionary. They model emotional intelligence instead of control. They teach by example, not by enabling. And they hold space not by absorbing pain, but by inviting others to hold their own. This is where spiritual intelligence meets psychological wisdom. It is not enough to be kind. You must also be conscious. Because kindness without consciousness is often complicit in harm. So the empath sharpens their discernment, protects their frequency, and becomes unshakable in their self-worth. They may still feel deeply, but they no longer drown in others' waters. They still care, but from a place of sovereignty, not sacrifice. They still love, but now from wholeness, not from wounds. And this evolution becomes a mirror, too confronting for those who benefited from their silence. Because when the empath stops playing small, the narcissist loses their script. When the empath heals, the system has to shift, or it collapses. This is not revenge. This is alignment. This is what it means to awaken spiritually, to become conscious in a world that profits from unconsciousness. And that is why the awakened empath is no longer the target of manipulation. They are the embodiment of truth. And so, the moment an empath finally snaps is not just a breaking point, it is a turning point. One the narcissist never anticipates. Hidden strength rises when silence ends, and what once looked like weakness transforms into unstoppable clarity and power. If this message resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Let's grow together. Make sure to like this video, share it with someone who needs this truth, subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming videos. Your voice matters. Leave a comment below and let us know your thoughts. Until next time, stay strong, stay awakened, and stay aligned with your highest wisdom, the secret confident women never say out loud. Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. Aristotle. In a world that often confuses loudness with confidence, there exists a quiet, sacred power that truly confident women carry, and they rarely talk about it. This video reveals that secret, grounded in Carl Jung's deep psychological truths and spiritual wisdom. What if the real strength isn't in proving your worth, but in never needing to explain it? As you watch, consider how this silent inner strength shows up in your own life. Comment below. What does confidence mean to you? Let's open up a dialogue of growth and spiritual awakening. You are not here just to be heard. You are here to be felt. 1. True confidence is rooted in self-trust, not appearance or performance. There's a confidence that doesn't need to be explained. It's felt. It lives in the eyes, in the posture, in the quiet steadiness of a woman who no longer performs. She doesn't seek to be noticed, yet you notice her. Not because of how she looks or what she says, but because of how grounded she is in her own presence. Her power doesn't shout. It resonates. It's the kind of spiritual intelligence that Carl Jung pointed to when he spoke about the individuation process, the journey back to the authentic self, beyond the roles, masks, and expectations imposed by society. This woman has stopped performing to be accepted. She has stopped editing herself for comfort. She doesn't operate from fear of rejection because she no longer rejects herself. Her confidence is not rehearsed. It is remembered. It rises from deep within, from the parts of her soul that once shattered and have since been alchemized into strength. She is not confident because she believes she is better. She is confident because she is no longer trying to be anyone else. She has seen her own shadow and made peace with it. She's heard the voice of her own doubt and chosen to trust herself anyway. Her boundaries are not walls, but wisdom. She no longer explains herself because explanation implies permission, and she no longer seeks permission to be whole. Her stillness is not passivity, it's power. Her silence is not submission, it's sovereignty. She walks into a room with nothing to prove, and that alone shifts the atmosphere. Her aura is uncluttered by insecurity, her energy uncluttered by comparison. She understands now that self-trust is not built by appearing strong to others, but by choosing not to abandon yourself when you're alone. Carl Jung taught that wholeness, not perfection, is the goal of the soul. And this woman embodies that wholeness. She doesn't have to win every argument. She doesn't need every eye on her. Her energy speaks louder than her words. And when she does speak, it is with precision and purpose. Her voice carries the weight of someone who has spent years listening to herself in a world that constantly told her to doubt her worth. The world may call her mysterious or intimidating, but what they're really sensing is integrity. She has integrated all parts of herself: the messy, the divine, the vulnerable, the fierce, and in doing so, has become untouchable in the most sacred way. She radiates the rarest kind of beauty, the beauty of self-possession. It's not just spiritual awakening, it's embodiment. She is not just aware of her power, she lives inside it. Her decisions aren't dictated by trends or validation, but by an unshakable inner compass. She knows that true confidence doesn't need to speak for itself. It simply shows up. And in doing so, it teaches others to rise not by force, but by frequency. This is the secret confident women never say out loud, because it's not something they learned to perform. It's who they became when they stopped needing the world's permission to exist as they are. If you're ready to build true confidence from within, not from performance or appearance, comment below. I trust myself. And let this be your first step into deeper self-trust and spiritual wisdom. 2. Most people silently betray themselves. Daily. Most people unknowingly betray themselves, not through grand decisions, but through the smallest, most ordinary moments. The ones that go unnoticed by the world, but remembered by the soul. Each time you say you'll rest and don't, promise to speak up, but stay silent. Feel something deeply and still ignore it. A crack forms in the sacred bond between you and your inner self. This isn't laziness or forgetfulness. It's a pattern of spiritual self-abandonment. Carl Jung called it the loss of the self, a fracture in the psyche that leads not only to emotional exhaustion, but to a profound identity crisis. Over time, the woman you once were begins to fade. You still smile, you still function, but beneath the surface, you're hollow, disconnected, a ghost living in someone else's story. You don't recognize yourself because you've replaced your own voice with the noise of everyone else's expectations. Confidence doesn't disappear all at once. It erodes quietly when you stop listening to the whispers of your own spirit. When you live more for what others think of you than for what feels true inside, your inner compass becomes blurry. That blur isn't confusion. It's a sign you've drifted away from your center. Jung reminds us that who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. To awaken spiritually is to return not to the version of you the world applauded, but to the version of you who lived in truth before she learned to shrink, before she was taught to please rather than to trust. The true spiritual woman does not walk with arrogance. She walks with alignment. And in that alignment, there is no need to convince, perform, or explain. Her life speaks for her. Her presence is her power. The real betrayal isn't when others forget your worth. It's when you forget it first. When you sacrifice your integrity to avoid conflict. When you call it kindness, but it's really fear. When you keep peace with the world, but declare war on yourself. And yet, even in the deepest self-abandonment, there is always a door back home. It begins the moment you stop numbing, stop negotiating with your intuition, and start keeping even the smallest promises to yourself. One promise, one choice, one moment of truth. Spirituality is not about rituals or performance. It is about returning. It is remembering who you are underneath the layers you were forced to wear. Your spiritual awakening will not arrive with fireworks. It will come softly in the moment you choose your truth over your habit, your alignment over your apology, yourself over your survival pattern. And in that choice, day by day, your confidence is no longer something you chase. It becomes who you are. Leave a like and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss a message that could change your life. Most people betray themselves daily, silently and unconsciously, but not you. Comment below, "I deserve to live a financially prosperous life," to affirm your commitment to choosing self-loyalty over silent self-betrayal. 3. The root of insecurity is living from the social mask. Most people confuse confidence with charisma, but real confidence has nothing to do with being loud, visible, or praised. True confidence is the quiet power that radiates from those who no longer depend on the world to tell them who they are. It comes from within, rooted in deep self-awareness and spiritual development, not from how many people approve of you or how often you're applauded. When you live behind a social mask, constantly performing a version of yourself that feels acceptable to others, you trade your essence for acceptance. Carl Jung called this mask the persona, a necessary social function, but a dangerous place to live from. Over time, this detachment from the authentic self leads to chronic insecurity, because no matter how perfect the mask becomes, the soul always knows it's not being seen. That's why praise never feels like enough, and why criticism cuts so deeply. Because it's not just your image that feels attacked, it's your entire sense of identity, which was built on shifting ground. The woman who is truly confident doesn't seek validation, because she already lives in alignment with her values. Her energy speaks before she does. Her presence is her proof. She doesn't need to be the loudest in the room because she's already connected to something far greater than performance. She's rooted in being. She has done the hard spiritual work, embracing her shadow, healing her wounds, and reclaiming the parts of herself she once disowned to be loved. And in doing so, she no longer waits for the world to reflect her worth back to her. She sees it clearly for herself. This kind of confidence cannot be faked or fabricated. It must be lived. It is a byproduct of knowing who you are beneath the expectations, beneath the projections, beneath the roles you've played for safety. Spirituality teaches us that our power doesn't come from being seen. It comes from being whole. Confidence grows when we stop negotiating with our truth to earn approval, when we stop shrinking to fit a room or inflating to dominate it, when we simply allow our essence to speak for itself. This is the shift from persona to presence, and the result is magnetic, not because you're trying to be, but because aligned energy is irresistible. You become a lighthouse, not a mirror. You guide rather than reflect others' opinions. This is what makes confidence sustainable. It's no longer dependent on moods, compliments, or social metrics. It becomes a steady light in your own life. If you've ever felt the tension between who you are and who you've been performing to be, that tension is sacred. It's not something to run from. It's something to listen to, because it's pointing you back to your essence. And from that place, real confidence begins. Not as a performance, but as a natural consequence of inner peace. Not as something to chase, but as something to remember. Your spiritual development isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming yourself again, without apology, without mask, without the need for permission. 4. The goddess energy versus wound energy. Carl Jung once said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And for women, this journey is a sacred reclamation of energy. There are two dominant energies shaping a woman's presence in the world: goddess energy and wound energy. Goddess energy is not something you perform, it's something you return to. It's calm, magnetic, and rooted in self-trust. It doesn't need an audience. It doesn't chase applause. A woman in her goddess energy has stopped asking the world for permission. She no longer explains her silence or softens her voice to be accepted. Her confidence isn't rehearsed, it's embodied. She's grounded, radiant, and aligned with a deep spiritual intelligence that whispers, "I belong to myself." She walks into the room with no need to dominate it. Her power is her presence. And presence, as Carl Jung would affirm, is not performance, it is integration. But for many women, especially those raised in environments where love was conditional, the dominant frequency isn't goddess energy, it's wound energy. Wound energy is anxious, reactive, and deeply performative. It's the woman who stays silent to keep the peace. It's the woman who overcompensates to feel worthy. It's the woman who fears abandonment so much that she gives too much, too soon, too often. And yet, this energy isn't a flaw. It's an emotional survival code born in childhood, forged in the places where her voice was ignored, her truth dismissed, and her needs shamed. Jung taught that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life. Wound energy is the unconscious taking the lead, but cloaked in overachievement, in busyness, in proving and pleasing. It is a woman trying to earn the love she never had by becoming what everyone else needs. The woman in her goddess energy doesn't operate from the fear of being left behind. She knows what it means to walk away with grace. She doesn't negotiate with disrespect. She doesn't translate silence into rejection or take inconsistency as proof of her unworthiness. She responds instead of reacts. She chooses her peace over performance, her values over validation. And she does this not because she's perfect, but because she's spiritually awake. Because she has faced her shadow and sat with her inner child and said, "We don't have to beg anymore." She doesn't need to speak loudly to be heard. Her stillness is felt. Her decisions come from discernment, not desperation. Her boundaries are not punishments. They are sacred declarations of self-worth. True confidence isn't loud, and it doesn't seek the spotlight. It simply refuses to shrink. A woman who has returned to herself no longer identifies with the roles that once defined her. She is not the abandoned daughter, the people pleaser, the anxious overachiever. She is the woman who alchemized all of that into spiritual wisdom. She is the integration of light and shadow, the meeting point of clarity and compassion. She no longer seeks love, she embodies it. And the world responds not to what she says, but to what she has become. If you're ready to embody your goddess energy and release the wounds of the past, comment below, "I rise in divine power," and let this be your sacred affirmation. 5. Individuation is the path to unshakable confidence. True confidence isn't loud, it's rooted. Carl Jung's concept of individuation reveals that unless you integrate your shadow, your so-called confidence is just a mask, one that cracks the moment life applies pressure. Many women are taught to perform, to appear assured, to smile through the storm. But deep down, without spiritual awakening, they feel unworthy and reactive. Real power emerges when you turn inward, not outward, when you stop running from your wounds and begin to understand them as sacred messages. It's in that moment, sitting with your discomfort, that you reclaim the pieces of yourself you were conditioned to hide. The woman who has faced her repressed emotions becomes unshakable because nothing inside her is disowned. She doesn't need to convince anyone of her worth. She simply embodies it. And this embodiment isn't born from perfection. It's born from truth. Jung once said, "Wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the contraries." That means your sadness belongs. Your anger has wisdom. Your fear holds insight. The spiritual path is not about being light all the time. It's about making peace with your shadow so the light can shine through you without distortion. When you've seen your shadow and you no longer fear it, your energy shifts. People sense it. They feel your presence before you speak. You no longer seek validation because your value is no longer negotiable. You've internalized it through spiritual discipline, self-confrontation, and emotional honesty. And this depth is what makes you magnetic. It's not the way you speak, it's the weight behind your words. Not the way you look, but the wholeness you've embodied. In modern life, where speed and surface dominate, this kind of slow, soulful integration is rare, but it's the source of all real confidence. The woman who has walked through her inner darkness emerges not fragile, but forged. Her silence becomes powerful. Her boundaries become sacred. Her decisions come from alignment, not fear. And when someone disrespects her, she doesn't shrink. She simply walks away because she no longer bargains with energy that does not honor her presence. This is the quiet revolution of spiritual intelligence. You don't perform to be seen. You exist in your full truth because you have seen yourself. And in seeing yourself, you have remembered what society tried to make you forget. That your worth is not a performance, it is a presence. 6. Keeping promises to yourself is the foundation of self-trust. Real confidence isn't born from affirmations, it's built from consistent self-honoring behavior. When you do what you say you'll do, even in the smallest of ways, you create a silent yet powerful shift within your being. Waking up early, journaling before bed, saying no when you mean no. These aren't just habits. They are declarations to your unconscious that you are someone worth trusting. Carl Jung taught that the unconscious is not just a shadowy reservoir of repressed thoughts, but a deeply intelligent force that listens to your behavior more than your words. When your unconscious notices that your actions consistently match your intentions, it begins to relax. It starts to believe in you. And with that belief, your self-worth begins to rise not because the world approved of you, but because you stop betraying yourself. Spiritual development isn't about chasing enlightenment on mountaintops. It's about becoming the kind of person your soul respects. It's easy to speak about self-love, harder to live it in the quiet choices of getting out of bed when you promised yourself, stepping away from the toxic conversation, writing in your journal instead of scrolling. These seemingly small decisions are the true rituals of spirituality. They are how you come back into alignment. When your inner voice tells you to rest and you honor it, or when it nudges you to begin something and you actually begin, you affirm a sacred relationship with yourself. Over time, this becomes your spiritual foundation. And with that confidence grows, not performative confidence, but a calm, magnetic presence that doesn't need to be explained. This is why truly confident women don't need to broadcast their strength. It radiates quietly through their self-respect. They've kept enough promises to themselves that their energy speaks louder than any words. You feel them when they enter a room because they are congruent. There is no war between their intentions and their behavior. They live in alignment, and that alignment makes them luminous. You cannot fake this kind of presence. It is earned in the unseen moments, in the spiritual choices made when no one is watching. It's not about being flawless. It's about being faithful to yourself. If you find yourself doubting your worth, look not at your goals, but at your rituals. Are you following through on what you say you'll do? Are you honoring your boundaries? Are you keeping the promises that matter most, the ones you make in silence, with no audience but your soul? Because self-trust isn't a mindset. It's a memory your body carries every time you didn't abandon yourself. And once that memory becomes strong enough, confidence no longer becomes something you chase. It becomes the ground you walk on. This is the essence of true spirituality. Not perfection, but devotion to your own growth. You rebuild yourself, one sacred promise at a time. If this message stirred something deep within you, stay connected by subscribing to Spiritual Wisdom. Here, we explore the power of keeping your promises to yourself, the true root of confidence and spiritual alignment. Like this video, share it with someone on the same path, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss a moment of awakening. 7. Developing intuition reconnects you with the body's ancient wisdom. Carl Jung saw intuition as one of the 4 foundational pillars of human consciousness, equal to thinking, feeling, and sensing. Yet in today's logic-obsessed world, intuition is often dismissed as unreliable or irrational. But the truth is, intuition is not a fantasy. It is a deep, embodied intelligence that flows through your nervous system, your breath, your skin. It is the spiritual wisdom stored not in your mind, but in your body. Every time your chest tightens when you're about to say yes to something you don't want, every time your stomach knots before walking into a room, your body is trying to tell you what your conscious mind has been trained to override. Intelligence is not just mental sharpness. It is the ability to sense, to feel, to recognize subtle energies and respond to them with clarity. Real confidence is not loud. It is rooted in self-trust, in the quiet certainty that comes from knowing what your body is whispering before your mind even forms a thought. This is where true spiritual awakening begins, not in more knowledge, but in deeper presence. When you slow down enough to check in with your body, to ask, "Where am I tense?" or "What am I avoiding feeling right now?" you reclaim access to a sacred inner compass. You're no longer outsourcing decisions to opinions, trends, or fears. You're listening to the ancient intelligence running through your veins. Jung taught that the unconscious is not a chaotic void, but a rich landscape of meaning waiting to be heard. And the way we hear it is through sensation, not thought. Through breath, not words. Through the feeling of a yes or a no that rises before explanation. Daily rituals of reconnection, silent mornings, intuitive journaling, body check-ins before big decisions aren't just wellness trends. They are spiritual practices that help you return to yourself. They sharpen your discernment, They rewire your nervous system to stop seeking permission and start honoring your inner authority. Because spiritual maturity is not about escaping the body, it's about becoming fully present within it. The more you listen, the more you realize your body has been speaking truth all along. Not loud or dramatic, but in the smallest of shifts. A breath held, a jaw clenched, a sudden warmth in your heart when you speak what's real. These are not coincidences. They are communication. You don't need to explain your intuition to anyone. That's the secret confident women carry. They don't debate their instincts. They don't beg for proof. They simply feel, trust, and move. There is power in that kind of silent certainty. A woman rooted in her body is rooted in truth. And that kind of presence cannot be imitated. It's not about appearing confident. It's about being in harmony with your own energetic truth. When your mind and body speak the same language, decisions become effortless, boundaries become natural, and clarity becomes your resting state. That is not a performance. That is power. 8. Setting boundaries is a sacred act of self-respect. Boundaries are not barriers to connection. They are bridges to self-respect. In a world that constantly asks you to give more, explain more, tolerate more, the most radical act of spiritual awakening is simply to say, "This is where I end and where I begin." Boundaries aren't just emotional preferences. They are energetic declarations that guard your inner sanctuary. Carl Jung taught that individuation requires you to integrate your shadow and claim your wholeness. And part of that process is realizing that your sacred energy deserves protection, not constant exposure. When you allow people to drain your energy without consequence, you send a signal to your subconscious that your peace is negotiable. But every time you choose to honor your need for silence, solitude, or space, you rebuild the foundation of trust with your own soul. Each small act of boundary setting, declining a draining conversation, stepping back from chaotic dynamics, choosing rest over obligation, is a whisper from your higher self saying, "You are worthy of peace." And the more you listen, the stronger your spiritual wisdom becomes. Boundaries are not about punishment. They are not reactions. They are intentions. They are daily rituals that keep your spirit clear, your purpose intact, and your intuition sharp. In modern life, where noise is constant and expectations unrelenting, protecting your inner world is not selfish. It's sacred. It is the foundation of all spiritual intelligence. There is a subtle but powerful shift that happens when a woman stops betraying herself to be liked. She no longer waits for external validation to feel safe. She no longer softens her truth to fit into spaces that feel spiritually cold. She becomes a woman who does not explain her boundaries. She embodies them. Her presence becomes a frequency. Her silence becomes a shield. Her clarity becomes magnetic. People feel her alignment before she speaks. And that is the energy of someone who has awakened. Someone who understands that spirituality is not about being endlessly open. It's about being exquisitely aligned. If you feel discomfort when enforcing your boundaries, know that this is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign that you're breaking old contracts of self-abandonment. The discomfort is not proof you're doing it wrong. It's proof you're healing. You're learning to choose yourself without guilt, without apology, without flinching. You're learning that your purpose, your presence, and your peace are not things to be negotiated, explained, or earned. They are your birthright. When you set boundaries, you're not pushing people away. You're pulling your spirit back home. And in that sacred return, you meet the most powerful version of yourself. The one who doesn't beg to be protected, she becomes the protection. To affirm your sacred commitment to self-respect, comment below, "I honor my boundaries." Let this be your powerful declaration that setting limits is not selfish. It's spiritual. Your strength inspires others to rise in their worth too. 9. A woman with self-trust heals others without trying. A woman who trusts herself radiates healing without even trying. She doesn't need to speak to soothe the room. Her energy does it for her. People feel safe around her, not because she offers advice or solutions, but because her nervous system is calm, grounded, and deeply regulated. She has done the quiet spiritual work that most avoid facing the shadows, healing the pain, and integrating her truth. And now, her very presence feels like home to others. She walks into a space, and without saying a word, hearts open. This is not charisma. This is coherence. Carl Jung once wrote, "Who looks inside, awakes." And that's exactly what she has done. She has awakened through the path of spiritual development, not by seeking validation, but by standing in wholeness. She no longer performs for approval. She no longer rushes to be chosen. She no longer tries to prove her worth because she knows it. Her confidence doesn't demand attention. It commands respect through stillness. Her aura is quiet, but powerful. She's not interested in being seen by the world. She's interested in seeing herself clearly. That clarity becomes a mirror for others, not a mirror that flatters, but one that reveals. When people are in her presence, they feel called to rise, not because she tells them to, but because something in her reminds them of who they truly are. Her spiritual presence awakens what has been dormant in others. It's not forceful, it's magnetic. She has become a living embodiment of safety, alignment, and truth. She holds space without needing to control the outcome. She listens not to reply, but to feel. She observes rather than reacts. And this emotional discipline, this inner peace, is not something she was born with. It's something she built, one sacred choice at a time. The more she softened into her truth, the more her energy solidified into power. She doesn't need to defend her boundaries. Her frequency makes them known. She doesn't explain her worth. Her energy confirms it. She doesn't chase love. She is love, grounded in the clarity of self-knowing. In her stillness, there is strength. In her silence, there is language. In her restraint, there is revolution. This is the power of spiritual development, not to change others, but to change the atmosphere simply by being who you are without apology. She is not trying to fix the world. She simply shows up whole, and wholeness heals. Her lessons are not taught, they are felt. She teaches you to trust your own timing, to honor your own process, to stop abandoning your soul for the comfort of others. And perhaps the most radical thing she does is allow others to witness a woman who does not betray herself to belong. That image lingers long after she leaves the room. She is a reminder that true healing is not performance. It is presence, not noise, but resonance, not effort, but embodiment. Through her, we remember that spirituality is not a look or a label. It's the energy of integrity, and it is always unmistakable. 10. Self-trust is a daily relationship, not a destination. Self-trust isn't something you arrive at. It's a sacred rhythm you commit to each day through the small, quiet choices no one sees. Confidence is not some magical quality you're born with. It is forged in the fires of daily decisions, boundary setting, and keeping your promises to yourself when it's easier to break them. It's not loud, it's not boastful, and it doesn't need to be announced. It builds silently every time you walk away from what drains you and lean into what expands you. True confidence is not the absence of fear. It's refusing to let fear drive the car. You feel the doubt, the tremble, the vulnerability, but you show up anyway. And that's where the power lives. Carl Jung said, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." Confidence isn't about appearances. It's about consistency. It's spiritual wisdom in action, a form of inner intelligence that no external praise can give and no criticism can take away. A spiritually intelligent woman doesn't strive to be fearless. She simply refuses to be controlled by fear. She's not performing strength. She is becoming it. She doesn't run from her wounds. She integrates them. She doesn't need to over-explain, prove, or beg to be understood. She speaks less, but says more. Her energy speaks before her mouth opens. There's a grace in her silence and a boundary in her stillness. She's not chasing validation because she knows her presence is enough. That knowledge doesn't come from books or compliments. It comes from showing up for herself when it was hard, from telling the truth when lying would have been easier, from honoring her intuition even when logic said no. She has met every version of herself, the confused, the broken, the bitter, and didn't run. That is the kind of woman who glows without trying. She doesn't radiate because life was easy. She radiates because she chose not to be hardened by it. This kind of spiritual awakening doesn't announce itself. It reveals itself through how you treat yourself when no one's watching. It shows in how you protect your peace without apology, how you say no without guilt, and how you walk away not out of anger, but out of self-respect. Carl Jung taught that we return to our authentic self, not by pretending to be better, but by becoming more real. And the realest women are the ones who no longer perform to be accepted. They rest in their own vibration, in their own alignment. They know that the most intelligent confidence is quiet, sacred, and embodied. It doesn't scream. It simply exists. She has nothing to prove because she is not driven by the illusion of being chosen. She knows she already is. So the secret confident women never say out loud is this: they built themselves in private, healed themselves in silence, and now they move through the world with an unshakable grace that only comes from radical self-trust. Thank you for spending this time with us here on Spiritual Wisdom. If today's message spoke to something deep within you, if it revealed a truth you've always known but never had words for, then this is your invitation to go deeper. Confidence doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it's the quiet power of a woman who knows who she is. If you felt that power today, don't keep it to yourself. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And be sure to turn on notifications so you never miss the next awakening moment. Until next time, stay grounded, stay wise, and remember, your presence is the loudest truth you'll ever speak.